After the service, the three Cooper children stood in the community room of the Children's Service Agency and waited for someone to tell them what they were supposed to do next. When the counselor walked into the room, followed by a woman that looked a lot like their mother, they were speechless and hoped she was a long lost relative that had heard about their mother's death and, like the cavalry, had come to their rescue. It turns out that was half true. She was indeed a relative, although she was not long lost. She had known about the children all their lives, but had not approved of their mother's marriage, so she, like all the others, decided to stay away from the whole ugly thing. Aunt Charlene was their mother's cousin from Baltimore, and she had agreed to take all of the children for a while, at least until some permanent arrangements could be made. One look at her, and Jay knew they weren't going to get along because he didn't like her. He didn't know if it was the way she looked at them, like they were dirty, or if it was the way she talked about their parents' marriage, like it was dirty, or the way she talked about the money she was going to be getting for taking care of them, like it was the only reason she was doing this. Whatever the reason, Jay knew his newfound aunt was not going to like him because he hated her already. When the counselor asked Charlene if she just wanted to take the girls, she looked at Jay for a long time as if trying to read his mood. She saw a defiance in him that told her she was going to have trouble with him and was on the verge of separating the kids when the oldest girl began pleading with her not to leave him behind. Please, Aunt Charlene, please don't leave him here. We promise to be good. We won't give you a bit of trouble, I swear. Just please don't leave my brother here. When Christine heard her sister begin to cry, she too started crying. And because she didn't want the white counselor to think she was a cold hearted person, Charlene soothingly told the girls not to cry because she was going to take them all. This brought a tearful thank you from the girls, but Jay never opened his mouth, a gesture that did not go unnoticed by Charlene, Mimi, or the counselor. So they were packed up and shipped off to Baltimore, much to the relief of the counselor and the entire racist Cooper clan. The adjustment to Baltimore was a mixed one for the children because of the impatient and perfecting nature of their Aunt Charlene. Not able to have any children of her own, Charlene and her husband Phil sought other means to have a child. Numerous trips to the fertility clinics proved fruitless, and after 5 years of disappointing, heartbreaking attempts, they abandoned any hope of becoming parents and instead chose to pamper themselves with material niceties. They lived in a three-bedroom colonial style house in a cul de sac in the rural area of Baltimore. Determined not to have his wife constantly reminded of her inability to have children, Phil decided to choose an area that consisted mostly of career oriented, childless couples like themselves. Charlene had a degree in fashion and took great pride in her decorating abilities, and in her spare time immersed herself in the beautification of her home. What was once considered a nice house soon became a showpiece and was pictured in Home and Garden and Essence. They became a couple of society and through several charity benefits a year that made them the pride of Baltimore. Soon the idea of having or not having children was no longer a sore point in the Madisons' marriage, and Phil was willing to put up with anything that would make his wife happy. When Charlene heard of the plight of her long lost cousin and her children, she decided to intervene on the children's behalf. But when she approached her husband, he was not very enthusiastic over the idea. Although she assured him it would be good for their image and that it was just until her other cousin in Queens could get them, Phil was worried it would open old wounds of her inability to conceive. Charlene assured him she was over her baby woes, but he knew no woman was ever over her baby woes, especially when she had spent the better part of her adult life trying to have one. when Charlene contacted the local media and allowed them to publicize the story of her cousin's death and the possibility of the children being separated from each other because of their father's desertion and her decision to rescue them and raise them, she was pictured as a woman with a heart of gold that was willing to put other people's happiness before her own. Phil began to relax a little when he saw it was more because of the attention she would get than the fact she was finally having children to mother. But his worries returned the first time he set his eyes on Mimi and Christine. They were the most beautiful children he had ever seen, and because they were Charlene's first cousin's children, there was a strong family resemblance. When the local newspaper came to photograph the children, all he kept hearing was how they could be Charlene's own children. And each time he heard it, an icy chill ran down his spine and dread filled his heart. He didn't know if it was because Charlene slightly resembled their mother or because they really needed someone to latch onto, but the girls took to her immediately and a bond was created that worried Phil greatly. Now, the boy, on the other hand, was a different story altogether. He was the complete opposite of the girls. He was sullen and sulky and did not open up to anyone, no matter what was offered to him. He seldom smiled and remained holed up in his room whenever he was home. He made no friends at school and soon became the target of the school bullies because of his fair complexion and lone status. Although he got beat up quite often, he opted to keep the abuse to himself, and this caused his sisters and aunt much anxiety. When Phil attempted to speak to Jay in an attempt to bridge the gap that was widening between them, it just caused him to sink further into his cocoon of defiance and isolation. Mimi was at a loss at Jay's behavior and couldn't understand why he was so angry all the time. But whenever she tried talking to him, all she got back was hostility and rebuke. Jay, why are you acting so nasty to Aunt Charlene when all she's trying to do is be nice to you? She asked one day when they were alone. Did I ask her to be nice to me? I didn't ask nobody for anything, so I don't have to be nice to anybody. You can act like these people are God's gift all you want, but I'm not letting these snotty people make me forget about mom like you. That's not fair. I'm not forgetting about mom, but mom's gone and we have to move on. Besides, mom would not like the way you're acting right about now. What do you care about what mom would want? All you care about right now is all the new clothes you're getting and all the attention you're getting and how everybody is saying you look like Aunt Charlene and how she could be your real mother. So don't tell me what mom would want right now. That's not true. I have not forgotten about mom. But the fact is, mom is gone and she's not coming back. And if I had a choice, I'd rather live here with Aunt Charlene than back at home where they treated us like dirt. At least here, we get treated nice. And if you weren't so selfish, you would think about how your nasty attitude might make Aunt Charlene not want us around anymore and send us back home. Christine is so happy here, and I'm happy here. And if you give yourself half a chance, you might be happy here. I don't want to be happy here. I hate it here. And in case you've forgotten, we are not staying here. And when was the last time we went to church, Mimi? These people only care about money, and that's probably why they took us so they could get the money. But I guess that thought never crossed your mind. Why would they want to take us for the money, Jay? Look at this house. They already have lots of money, I think. But before she could go on, their Aunt Charlene walked into the room with a look of distress on her face, and they both knew she had heard their entire conversation. Not used to someone being unappreciative of her generosities, Charlene was not prepared for her nephew's ungrateful behavior. At first, she thought all he needed was some time to adjust to his new home. But he didn't seem to be coming around and even seemed to be getting more distant. Phil had even tried speaking to him, but was met with such hostility and defiance that he decided to leave him alone and did everything he could to avoid contact with him. It had been 2 months since the children had arrived, and the girls seemed to be adjusting quite nicely. But Jay was proving to be a great disappointment and an uncomfortable disruption to her plans of a perfect, happy family. Not having had children of her own, she had her own idea of how children should be. She pictured sweet faced little girls with angelic smiles and dainty mannerisms, all dressed in lace and bows. When she first agreed to take the children, she did it to further her public image as humanitarian and to add to her accolades of accomplishments to qualify her for the coveted title of Woman of the Year. But when she laid eyes on Mimi and Christine, she forgot all about her promise not to get too wrapped up in the children and fell head over heels in love with them. She went all out for their comfort and decided to give them everything money could buy, which was quite upsetting to her husband and Jay. Phil loved his wife with all his heart and had done so from the very first time he laid eyes on her. He could remember the color of the dress she had on, how she wore her hair, and what the weather was on the day he first saw her, and he promised himself then and there he would do everything in his power to meet, marry, and make this woman happy for the rest of her life. Theirs was a storybook wedding that Phil spared no expense for, and as far as he was concerned, he was the luckiest man on earth. Their vacation in Curacao was magical, and they were still on their honeymoon 3 years after their wedding.